chats with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. As I've previously talked about in the GrowGetter growth marketing blog, B2B marketing consists of several different areas of focus. There's demand, there's brand, there's content, product marketing, for example, and we haven't really done a lot of talking about product marketing, which is actually one of my favorite areas. So we're going to dive into the role of product marketing and why it's important today. I'm joined by Morgan Lehmann, Senior Director and Head of Product and Solutions Marketing at SurveyMonkey to discuss the topic. She's been named a top 100 product marketing mentor by Sharebird, and I'm excited to chat with her today. Welcome to the show, Morgan.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you today. Please excuse my connection if for some reason I lose you. I'm on the road. I'm at SampleCon this week. So excited to chat with everybody here, but really excited to chat with you today, Morgan, about product marketing.
It's definitely one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Mine too. And I can't think of anybody better to talk about it today.
Well, thank you again. Yeah, I love joining, events and talks like this just because I like to, get out there and see what questions people have, but also share my expertise where I can. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, let's kick off with the basics. Can you give us a high level overview of what product marketing is to you and sort of how it fits into organizations?
Sure. And I will say that this is one of those functions that I think is consistently evolving a little bit. I will be honest, I didn't know that product marketing existed before I started doing it. We'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about my background, but getting my start in research and moving into product marketing, it was a really good fit. And I kind of just started learning by doing and talking to other people in the field. I'd say as a discipline, it's on the newer side, probably hedges a little more towards tech companies that have really leaned into building and scaling their product marketing functions. But when I think about just the root and the core of it, it's all about combining market knowledge, customer knowledge, competitive insights, and then product expertise to deliver a unified narrative, a winning go-to-market strategy, and ultimately help the rest of your marketing and sales partners succeed. So I would say that product marketing most often sits within the marketing org. So I've seen PMM sit in product or revenue orgs in the past, depending on the focus of the company. But mostly I see product marketing sit within marketing orgs, and then partners really closely with marketing, product, sales, and customer success teams within the company. And then if I were to dig into the top focus areas within product marketing or the things that we really own or drive, it'd probably be mostly defining the target audience, positioning and messaging, competitive intelligence. Sometimes we get into pricing and packaging a little bit, sales enablement, and then the real meat that probably most people think of when they think of product marketing is go-to-market product launches. So driving the end-to-end launch of new products and features.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, this is the thing that people think of when they think of product marketing, because I find that, a lot of times, depending on who you ask, if they're not a product marketers tend to have a pretty good handle on what they do. But other people in organizations, when asked, what does product marketing do? What's the role? What's the reason for being? It tends to be a lot more focused on go-to-market. But I think what's really interesting is what you said about kind of moving from a research role into a product marketing role is actually a really natural transition because there's so much research that needs to be done as part of a product marketing role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my started research, and that is something that has helped me transition to product marketing for sure. If I think about even some of the disciplines or focus areas that I just mentioned, defining the target audience, huge need for research there, because you're developing the ideal customer profile and personas. And there's a lot of research that goes into defining that kind of overall market segmentation, and then diving into what the real pain points and needs are, and then messages that will resonate with those buyers. Competitive intelligence as a little mini function within product marketing is like all about research, about researching competitive positioning and messaging about competitive products, and then developing your competitive positioning against the market. So much again goes into product marketing from a research standpoint, that I think that those two, like the skill set of being able to do your own research is something that is a really good recipe for success if you do want to move into product marketing.
For sure. What types of research do you tend to lean towards? Are you, how much time do you spend doing customer interviews versus surveys or things like that?
Yeah, it kind of varies across the board. It depends on what you're working on. So, for example, I mentioned our competitive intelligence program, for example, has like pretty routine research that we're doing. For example, that function owns our win-loss program, so that includes customer interviews, both on the prospect and customer side, and then we're also, in terms of persona research, like we probably run surveys once or twice a year to get persona insights, but we might be talking to customers or other people in that functional area probably continuously throughout the year. And then maybe for little projects here and there, as we say we need to launch a new product, then we have probably a body of research that goes into getting us ready for that, and validating messaging and pricing and things like that. So I would say it is a blend of qual and quant, and there are probably a couple things that are a little bit more routine throughout the year, but a lot of times it's ad hoc based on whatever the main focus of the quarter might be, whether it's a big launch or a new campaign, or say, we're refreshing messaging in some way. So yeah, it kind of just depends.
Yeah, for sure. And talk to me too about, you started talking about oftentimes product marketing sits in marketing, sometimes in product, sometimes in revenue orgs, which makes sense, right? Because it's such a cross-functional role. Like it really needs to sit in between all of those functions. So in some ways, it's very slight differences of a product marketer sitting in one function versus another. But talk to me about that collaboration, and sort of like, even from the research perspective, like how much are you leveraging maybe your customer facing teams to get customer insight or competitive intelligence and things like that? And what does that collaboration look like across teams?
Yeah. And just to your earlier comment about it sitting in different functions, what my experience is, I've seen smaller companies, depending on whether they're really product led or really sales led, that can sometimes be the determining factor of where product marketing sits. But as you mature as an organization, usually it gets grouped into marketing, because it is such a strategic, fundamental discipline that serves so many different teams within marketing, especially. In terms of collaboration, yeah, I'd say like product marketing tends to be this like nexus point between product, sales, and success specifically, while of course then being very much tied to all the different teams within marketing. So if I think about like with our brand team, we're helping them bridge that connection between brand, category, and product messaging, and making sure we're bringing product expertise to those to brand campaigns or creative assets like a brand explainer video or something like that. We get really close to demand gen. We're involved with a lot of their different tactics, whether it's webinars or events, providing guidance for any sort of gated e-guides or things like that. We get really tight with our web team. We own, for example, the entire product section of our website, and we're informing the team on like what topics and use cases and things we should be writing about for long form and SEO efforts. We're tied really closely with our growth team in terms of providing messaging through the different funnel stages to inform their advertising campaigns. And then like with product, we're really most closely tied to making sure that we understand both influencing, but also mostly making sure that we're translating what the final roadmap is into that go-to-market launch calendar. We're staying really close with the product partners on making sure that we're communicating out the roadmap to internal functions, but we also create customer-facing versions of our roadmap that can be shared with customers. And then, of course, really staying closely partnered with product to make sure that as we're launching new features, that enablement and then market launch goes smoothly without a hitch. And then our customer-facing teams, I'd say like what we're mostly involved in is enablement and kind of content creation. So I would say like from a training standpoint, making sure that all of our customer teams understand who our top personas are, what they care about, what they're using our product for, and just how to talk with them, how to resonate with them. And then there's a lot of content that we create, from sales pitch decks to collaterals and one-sheeters, brochures we might bring to events, things like that we enable the team with so that they can have those assets to like deliver to customers and again, have a good sales experience. So there is a lot of like back and forth collaboration that happens in terms of like both getting input and feedback from those teams, as well as then the outputs we create for them. But yeah, it's I'd say very well connected across those teams that I mentioned.
Yeah, it sort of has to be like,
there's no
way product marketing could actually be useful to the business if it's disconnected from those teams. Like it's almost like that alignment isn't even optional.
Yeah. Well, and it's so much so that sometimes when there's a need for alignment across those teams, even if it's not something that's a product marketing owned thing, they'll be like, oh, product marketing might be able to solve for that because they're already really connected to everyone. So I think like it just goes without saying that our job is very cross-functional by nature.
Yeah, for sure. That's so interesting. It's like, oh, the product marketers know how to collaborate. Let's bring that.
Big complex program you need to run. Oh, product marketing can handle it.
Right. I mean, it's kind of nice, right? Because everybody's trying to crack that code of like, how do I get my teams more aligned? Oftentimes the conversations around sales and marketing, but it could be all different teams. Product is a huge part of that equation too. And just by its nature, it's like you guys are the connectors. You're the kind of the voice of the customer within the organization and the ones kind of bringing everything together. It's just such a critical role and function. Yet I see a lot of companies don't have product marketing at all, or ones that, a lot of companies or leaders in different companies in our space especially are kind of mentioning that product marketing feels like their biggest gap. I hear that a lot. So there's a big need for it, and people maybe don't really know how to get started. But we started talking about this a bit earlier. Like, how did you get started in product marketing? How did you make that leap from research into this role?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into it because I'm sure my story is not conventional or linear, and that's probably what most people's stories are. So yeah, I got my start in market research. From an education standpoint, I have a master's in applied sociology, and then I actually went to go work for Nielsen. It was my first job doing marketing analytics. So I was doing like custom analytics, marketing ROI stuff. I was working for a bunch of big CPG companies in terms of my client base. And then, as life happens and I moved to the Bay Area, California for my husband's job. And at the time that was way before remote work was very well enabled with, I think I was doing phone calls and maybe some screen share at the time, but I wasn't really getting the same level of FaceTime with people that I wanted working remotely. But I found out that SurveyMonkey was headquartered a couple towns over and hiring. So I figured that was a nice, comfortable way to get into tech, was in an area that I knew a lot about, which was market research. And actually, when I first started at SurveyMonkey, I was in the sales org. So I was a subject matter expert. I knew that I could talk the talk when it came to research, could walk the walk in terms of methodology. And so my role was like part getting on the phone with prospects and clients as part of the sales cycle. Part of it was developing methodologies for our services team. But later, some of the strategy changed and I moved into more of a product operations role. I was helping the team build features into, it was actually our audience panel product. That we were building features like incidence rate and balancing and like expanding our sample and integrating with other people that you're probably talking to at SampleCon. And so I was doing more of that product related stuff. And then my projects started becoming more marketing focused. I was overhauling our website. I was creating sales materials. And so I realized that I needed to kind of make my role a bit more official, and finally just took on a product marketing title. And at that time, product marketing was embedded in our different product teams at SurveyMonkey. And right around the time that I was making this transition, we consolidated all product marketers into one team within our marketing org. So again, kind of that like earlier stage company getting their hands like dirty quick initially in product marketing. At the time, we were so product led that we sat in the product org and then transitioned into marketing. And so I ended up becoming the first product marketer for our market research arm of the business. I've grown in my role. Now I manage a team of 10 across product marketing, solutions marketing, competitive intelligence, and customer advocacy. So have been in product marketing now for about 7 years. I've been with SurveyMonkey for almost 9. So been there a while and have been able to kind of grow and stretch in the product marketing discipline at a company, again, where I've got a lot of confidence in other, like the product, but also the use cases and methodologies and the target audience behind it. So again, that transition from research to product marketing, especially at a company that does research technology, for me was this perfect blend of my two passions and skill sets.
Yeah, for sure. And also with like those couple of stops along the way and some of those like, in a subject matter expert role and a product role, like there's so much that like having sat in, like how much did it help you having sat in those seats?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
They need.
Immensely. I mean, I can't tell you how, as a product marketer, you always talk about, like shadowing sales calls or listening to Gong or like, making sure that you're like, getting that kind of ear to the ground voice of the customer through the sales process. Actually having that as part of my job description for about a year before transitioning into other areas. Like it was such a quick period of time where I got to really deeply understand what our customers needed, where they were finding fault with our product in the evaluation process, the things they were trying to do or hack our product to do for them. It just was this very quick crash course in our target persona, their use cases, their needs, how they evaluated vendors. Like it really, all product marketers should spend amount of time really digging in with sales and shadowing day in, day out, because there's no better way to really understand it firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you recommend somebody maybe new to the role like prioritizing something like that, or a leader helping to prioritize their team to do stuff like that? Because you mentioned, listen in on sales calls or listen to Gong recordings. It's so easy to do like one or two of those and then go about your business and do your job.
Yeah.
How would you recommend prioritizing that?
Well, so there's probably two aspects, which is like, how would you actually go about it? And then the other is, how do you just spend some amount of time doing it? So I've done things with my team where we've created like buddy systems or shadowing programs with sales success or customer operations. I think one of the best things you can do is just start building relationships with the sales team, leaders, but individual reps too. Find a couple that are like really good, really solid, in terms of like reps that you can count on to flag, hey, I had a call and it, we've got into this topic and it'd be great for you to either listen, or in some cases, as for example, if we've just launched a new product and you want to hear directly from customers, like making sure that you're in some of those initial pitch conversations to hear how it goes. Like building the relationships is key. The other thing I'd say is like kind of similar to how I was describing research earlier, like there's probably some amount that you're doing kind of continuously throughout the year. And maybe you just say like, hey, I'm going to like shadow or listen to X number of calls a week or X number of calls a month. Heavier when you're first ramping up, but as you have a really solid handle of it, just maybe you're asking for asking your rep connections about specific things that they're hearing or different topics or different product areas that you want to hear more about, and they can even flag that for you. Gong's a really great tool because you can like actually even just search through transcripts and it'll surface like some of the better calls for you to listen to, and then so there's probably continuous, but then it probably spikes. Like if you're working on a product launch or you're working on a improving or making one section of the sales cycle a little bit more efficient, like you can really dive in certain areas. For example, like we've been focusing recently on our SDR team and like increasing the MQL to SQL conversion rate. And so like diving in with them, seeing where maybe some of the gaps in knowledge might be that would, surface enablement opportunities. So there's probably a variety of ways you can do that continuously, but then also spike it when it comes to certain initiatives that you're trying to drive.
Yeah, that makes sense because you've got a lot of different objectives, internal and external objectives. As you were just saying that last piece, it's like, well, do you need to understand the customer and what they need from your product, or do you need to understand the training needs of a new team? Like two very different objectives and different reasons why you would shadow those calls or listen to them in Gong. And the transcripting is great on tools like that. Gong's not the only one, but also that a lot of times you can even put in keywords that you want it to surface for you, which is even
yeah, it's really interesting to know like how often certain things are getting brought up in conversations, how often competitors are being mentioned, etc. So it's tools like that are great for us.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me, like, now as a like leading a team and sort of leading the product marketing strategy, at what point does a company need product marketing, and how would you recommend they sort of get started to grow that function?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because sometimes I think we go about this in like a little bit backwards. I tend to think that product marketing is needed right away. It's so strategic. It's so fundamental to what you do. I've talked to startups where the very first marketing hire is a PMM. I think by nature, product marketers can be generalists. They can kind of do it all. I'd say even when I was first starting out in product marketing, I was actually handling website, content, sales enablement, collateral. I was managing events, which is how you and I met. I was like putting up our booth, taking it down, speaking on stage. So I think that product marketers can, in early stages, kind of flex and do more depending on, again, product-led, sales-led. But what's so critical early is getting your target buyer and messaging right and that product market fit. And so, that part of that is like how that shows up in a sales call or on your website. And, doing that kind of target buyer analysis and the crux of your positioning and messaging is like almost like day one what you need to do in terms of early stage company marketing. Is if you've gotten far enough without it, it's likely because you have that expertise in other areas of your marketing team. Maybe, your content team is really strong in messaging, or your demand gen team can kind of do it all when it comes to, creating the webinars and the speaking sessions and the content. So, if that skill set is already spread out, at some point you will want to, make sure that your team is set up by functional expertise, channel ownership, without the distraction of some of the other, kind of product marketing forward things, will help, drive efficiencies and ROI, because you can really focus on the implementation there. And then from a strategy standpoint, then product marketing that has the ability to fully focus on those pieces. So, it's hard to know what that inflection point is, or when you would need it. But I would say, earlier the better, because then you wouldn't be going to market with, the wrong buyer, the wrong key benefits, and things like that. So again, so fundamental to get right early.
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's like a lack of understanding again of like what product marketing is responsible for. So I've seen this happen a lot where companies are, 5, 8, 10 years old, and they're just hiring their first product marketer. They've been convinced. It's taken years for somebody to convince them, and they go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know. I didn't know that we needed this all along." And I think it's really great advice what you said about, it's like to have a product marketer be also a generalist, especially if you're in an earlier stage company and you're hiring your first marketer. I don't think the term really gets used anymore. It used to in earlier in my career, this idea of a T-shaped marketer, that you kind of do a little bit of everything, but there is a specialization that you have that you're more expert in. And sometimes that could be more on the demand side, which is, I think, where people really want to start.
Right. They want to get out there in the market. They want to be showing up in the right, event spaces and things like that. But, early on, you could have a fully outbound motion, but if your sales team isn't enabled with the right talk tracks and way of positioning your product, then that outbound motion isn't going to be very effective. So, yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's to start, you probably need someone who can span, but really, if they have that product marketing specialization, getting that early is really key.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're right. Like that outbound motion could be very ineffective without like sitting on top of a strong foundation. And, you could be writing a bunch of content about the wrong stuff if you don't have a really good understanding of your target audience and the things that they care about. And, you could be directing your product in the wrong direction. So yeah, it's very foundational. And, hopefully conversations like this for everybody who's listening is a good education on really like the critical role of product marketing, that it's not like go to market is sort of the end, right? And all of the stuff before that is so foundational and really makes a difference for the rest of the teams.
It really does. Yeah. I mean, it has gotten to a point where, like, if we've now gotten to the point where we have product level, persona level messaging frameworks, and we can pass that off to, whether it's a content strategist or a copywriter for a campaign, and like, they get it. They can read that and they can do their job much more effectively than kind of starting from scratch or some sort of brief. And then, you think about if you have those central resources, then everything starts to kind of hum together. It's like driving the same message. And like, marketers always realize, I forget what the stat is these days, but it's like 12 touch points before anyone does an action. But it's like, if you aren't going out with the same message, then it might take even longer, be much more inefficient if you weren't going out with the same message across all your different channels.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about go-to-market. Talk about the role of product marketing in go-to-market, and what sort of goes into planning go-to-market for, let's say, a new feature or product.
I love this. I love this area of product marketing. It's probably my favorite. To me, product marketing and go-to-market strategy are pretty much synonymous. We drive that strategy, who we're targeting, how we're messaging to them, what we're going to market with, a little bit of how it's packaged and priced, then of course all the actual launch and campaign things that you think about when it comes to a launch. But so yeah, we're central to that. And actually at SurveyMonkey a couple of years ago, I developed our go-to-market launch framework and process. So as part of that, we have, a tiering structure for, what types of products or features would require like a full throttle effort versus maybe a lower tiered effort, depending on, how differentiated is this new feature or product, or how important is this to customers and their experience in the product. So if it's like a little feature improvement, maybe this is just like, okay, we'll announce it to customers through a couple different touch points. But if it's like a truly differentiated product, then that's going to be a fully integrated cross-channel campaign that would get everything from press to demand gen to fresh content to, sales demos and all the things to enable, every channel and every go-to-market kind of customer facing role. And so, we have this whole tiering structure. It's very much integrated into our PDLC, or our product development lifecycle, so that, when product managers are getting to a certain point in development, then they're starting to coordinate with our team in terms of, okay, let's like think through what the strategy behind this will be. And then product marketing kind of takes on and drives that full launch. So it goes all the way through, how do we kick off with the right cross-functional partners? Usually we start, depending on the tier of the launch, a quarter ahead, or definitely several months ahead, to make sure that by the time this thing is ready to go, we've got all of the right content assets and channels ready to be activated throughout kind of the campaign. And usually there's a big launch moment, and then there's a bit of a drumbeat. And then we figure out, even from there, how does, let's say it's like a pretty critical feature that kind of should be proliferated through all of our product messaging everywhere. That is something we also take into consideration. It's actually a pretty, I would say, structured, coordinated process, at least, that we drive at SurveyMonkey. And it results in pretty well coordinated, integrated campaigns.
I love that you talked about this sort of different tiers, like based on customer impact ultimately, because that was going to be one of my questions. Like not all go-to-market is created equal, right? Like
right.
It has to be a sort of like, decision-making criteria of like, what do you make a lot of noise about versus what just needs like an in-app message or an update or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I can give you some examples, at least as it relates to SurveyMonkey. And we think about this in two ways. One is kind of like market launch tiers. So this is like, how are we alerting prospects or customers, investors, analysts, press, things like that. And then the customer impact tiers. So it would be our existing, on the SurveyMonkey side, like existing customers, whether they're kind of self-serve customers or sales assisted customers. And so something that would maybe garner like a high tier market launch would be a straight up new product or integration. So like last fall, we launched SurveyMonkey Forms. We launched our new Build with AI feature. Those got pretty decent tiered market launches. But then something that might be not really suited for a market launch, but maybe something that would be still a high impact to customers. For example, we refreshed our logged in homepage, which for customers who are logging into SurveyMonkey every day, like that would be a pretty decent disruption. So making sure that we message that appropriately and things like that to customers. But, there's always going to be like smaller features that go live, improvements to existing features that go live that customers maybe have been asking for. We've received that feedback, we build that feature, and we definitely close that feedback loop with the customer to say, hey, this thing's live now. But it might not be something that's so differentiated that you shout it from the mountaintops with a press release and all this other stuff.
For sure. For sure. Do you ever have like misalignment internally about what tier a release should be? Ever like product teams like, this is the biggest thing we've ever done, and sales is like, our prospects aren't going to care at all about this. Like, how do you play sort of like bring people together on that if that ever comes up?
Yeah. Well, so at SurveyMonkey, we're big into creating DACY frameworks or RACY frameworks. Yeah. So there's always going to be a decision maker and approver on stuff like this. So when it comes to go-to-market launches, product marketing is the driver, and then up to the leadership, it would be the approver. So if we're considering something tier 1, like our SurveyMonkey Forms launch last year, that was a pretty unanimous one. Like we were building a new product. We knew that we were wanting to make a big splash. But then something that maybe is a new feature, we can take some feedback into consideration. So like maybe it's a tier 2 or it's a tier 3, but like the actual activities that we do to support those launches could change. Like, so for example, a new feature that we create that maybe is like, like a nice improvement, but like not this kind of big splash, maybe even in the US, but maybe for international customers, it's like, oh my gosh, they've been asking for this for forever and they're so excited and like can't wait to go pitch this and whatever. So there could be some things like that, or nuances by geo or by market that influence. Okay, maybe we do a little bit of extra content enablement for our Europe-based sales team than we do for US, and make sure that we're supporting the teams that, because like I'm never going to shoot down excitement about getting something out there even more, especially from our customer-facing teams. And so if we can enable them to do that, then that's great.
Yeah. And it sounds like, again, like you have a foundation, you have a process and a framework in place, you have ownership very clearly defined. So all of that, like foundational work, really helps to direct everybody in the right direction when there is misalignment.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll refer back to I mentioned, I think a while back, that we also draft off the product roadmap. We create this go-to-market launch calendar. In doing that, we're making the decisions on tiers. So we know like kind of a year in advance, even though we don't know exactly what dates things are going to be releasing a couple quarters ahead. We know in general that, we're trying to lump a couple features maybe into a thematic theme that will then be able to allow us to spend a little bit more, resources or budget against that and make it a higher tier launch. And so if some of that stuff, slips and gets, spread out too much and we can't lump things together, okay, well then we've got, multiple tier 3 launches. And so we set that expectation up front and make sure that we've got the buy-in from leadership partners so that they can see it and say, okay, yes, we've got, tier 1 in Q2, we've got 2 tier 2s in Q3, we've got 3 tier 2s and a tier 1. You know what I mean? So we want to give some visibility into that ahead of time.
Yeah. That sounds really key, because then you've got everybody on the same page and knows what to expect.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you know that your product marketing function is working? What are some of the ways that you measure success?
Yeah. This has been one, and even if you go into like the Product Marketing Association reports and things like that, this is like, depending on what company you talk to, they're all probably doing this a little bit differently. The challenging thing with product marketing is we don't own a channel outright. Very different than our paid marketing channel, who can very clearly tell you their ROI on their paid social campaign. Like we don't have something like that that's as easily measurable. But we influence a lot of KPIs across the business. So I'd say like on the sales side of the business, things that I'm looking at for my team are how are we influencing pipeline? So given how involved we are on the website or content or demand gen, events and webinars and things like that, a lot of our work is actually in service of influencing pipelines. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at win rates. So how are some of our enablement efforts going towards increasing our win rates? In some cases, also our AOV, or our average order value. And so then the other piece to that is also sales confidence. And so we actually run a quarterly survey with our sales team to measure sales confidence. So it'll be across a variety of topics, whether it's like positioning ourselves against competitors, or maybe it's confidence in pitching a new product, or how are they feeling about the materials they have access to? What are the gaps? So we actually do run a survey internally to measure that. And then on the product side of the business, in terms of feature and product launches, we're going to be influencing things like signups and bookings, product adoption, and engagement. So for example, a metric we're really focused on at SurveyMonkey is survey deploys. So technically that's a survey that's collected at least 5 responses. So people that are out there sending surveys, we know that they're engaged with the product. And then pricing and packaging work can also influence, the package mix in terms of what people are buying, the AOV, the lifetime value of a customer. How are we moving the mix more towards annual versus monthly subscriptions? There's a lot in there that we're tying our work to as well. So it's not an easy answer. I probably rattled off more metrics than you expected, but in general, product marketing, again, because we're so central and part of the strategy, we're looking across all these things to see if something that we're doing may have moved the needle, or at least influence the campaigns that move the needle, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. That is a lot of metrics. And I imagine, does it sort of, just like with any marketing function, honestly, like there's a million things you can track and probably are tracking, but there's probably just 1 or 2 metrics that you're really, really focused on in a given time period based on the objectives of the business. So does that sort of like shift over?
Yeah. And like there's going to be, so like even across my team, I have individuals that focus more on our sales assisted part of the business. So like with them, and when it comes to, performance reviews or things like that, like we're looking at some of the more sales related metrics like pipeline, win rates, AOVs. But then after a product launch, like a launch itself will have its own goals tied to it. So did this increase our deploy rate, or, did people get started that much faster? Things like that. It is tied to specific initiatives too.
For sure. And I think too, like speaks to how important it is, again, for product marketing to be in really close alignment with other areas of the business, because it could either be an opportunity for like, hey, we win together because we have these shared metrics, or it could be a sort of like product marketing influence that metric. No, this was sales influence that metric, when in fact, like, working together on it is really what helps to elevate them. So another case for like, the more aligned you are internally and in collaboration, then the better you can really work towards those shared metrics.
Yeah, that I would say is exactly the philosophy for product marketing, because again, we don't own a channel. We don't influence everything about the sales funnel. In fact, like those are metrics owned by the sales team. Some of the product metrics are owned by the product team. Like, our marketing ROI on a campaign owned by that team that launched it. So again, like because we don't own any metric outright, it has to be this shared win. And that's definitely the mentality.
Yeah. And it sounds like you guys over at SurveyMonkey are really like adopting that. You guys are really, kind of on the same page about that stuff, which is so critical, because that mindset of like, we have to prove what we've contributed it can be challenging and can create more harm than good sometimes.
Yeah, especially when, a deliverable is a messaging framework. Okay, well then how do you measure the success of that? Well, part of it is like making sure that people are using it. And then like, okay, over time that will, proliferate through our content, our campaigns and our sales materials. And, it's really challenging to measure the impact of something like that. But, we try to create more of those shared goals where we can, at least for our team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, thank you so much for joining today and sharing all of your expertise. It's such an important topic. And I just feel like maybe a little bit of a mystery to a lot of people. So I hope demystified product marketing for you guys today. Thank you so much, Morgan, for joining.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to come back and dive into anything we talked about in more depth. And for those of you listening, feel free to reach out to me if you have further questions too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening in. I'm going to be back with another episode when I chat with strategic storyteller Bill Harper next week. We'll see you then.